All right, we'll get started in a second here as soon as our other speaker is back up at the stage. Okay, we will get started. Thanks very much for being here right after lunch. I'm very pleased to welcome you to our side event this afternoon, which is titled The Inextricable Link Between Diet Quality, Food Accessibility, and Food Inequality. Today, you're going to hear from a diverse group of experts from academia, government, and the private sector about the cost of eating well in several regions of the world and why millions of people globally are unable to afford to eat a nutritious diet. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Mitch Cantor, and I'm the Chief Science Officer for the Global Dairy Platform. I'm actually pinch hitting today, to use an American term, for our chair, Dr. Balaji, who's a minister for agriculture, the embassy, and a permanent representative for India in Rome, who was very integral to putting this session together. Unfortunately, he had a family situation and was unable to attend, so I'm going to sit in as chair for him and do the best that I can in his absence. Just as a starting point before we introduce the speakers and get into the session, just to set the stage, so to speak, as we know, the health and prosperity of any country is based on several factors. Key among them is the quality of the diet consumed by the majority of a population and the ability of most people in a country to have access to healthy and affordable food. Generally speaking, wealthier countries are able to produce and/or import the foods and ingredients that create high quality diets, and the majority of the citizens have access to and the ability to pay for these nutritious foods. Access to healthier diets, in turn, can lessen inequalities within the population, leading to greater health, education, and employment opportunities. In many developing countries, access to healthy foods and the ability to purchase them are often reserved for a select few. In these countries, creating several efficiencies in purchasing power and availability of nutrient-dense foods, chief among them, can help ease the burden of malnutrition by making highly nutritious foods affordable and accessible to the most people possible. Reducing food insecurity and malnutrition can in turn shrink the inequalities in these populations that currently exist. Our 5 speakers today, 2 of whom are live and 3 of whom will be joining us virtually, will speak about various aspects of food insecurity, malnutrition, and ways that people can make diet selections that allow them to get the most nutrition for the lowest cost. We'll have a question and answer period at the end of the 5 presentations, so please hold your questions until then, or you can ask them online and we'll have access to them when we get to the end of the presentations. Our first speaker today is Dr. Paul Mohan from the Ridditt Institute in New Zealand. Dr. Mohan will be speaking to us virtually about the link between diet quality and social inequality. During his long and distinguished career, Dr. Mohan has served as chair of monogastric biology at Massey University in New Zealand, as foundation head, the Institute of Food, Nutrition, and Human Health at Massey University, and as foundation co-director of the Ridditt Institute, among other positions. He currently holds the positions of distinguished professor at Massey University and the Ridditt Institute, and he's also a fellow laureate at Ridditt. He's published in excess of 500 scientific works. He was elected a fellow of the Royal Society of New Zealand, and he's also a fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry in Cambridge, England. In 2011, he was appointed chair of the FAO expert consultation to review recommendations on dietary protein quality in humans and has been a frequent contributor to FAO and WHO expert committees. He was also invited in 2021 to author a regional IAP policy briefing for the UN Food Systems Summit. With that, we recognize Dr. Mohan, who will be joining us virtually.
Hi everybody, and welcome to the CFS side event. I'm Paul Mowen, and today I'm going to give some introductory comments on the link between diet quality and social inequality. I cannot be with you in person today, but am more than happy to provide some introductory comments. Firstly, let us turn our attention to the UN SOFI report published this year, 2023. We find in the report that global hunger remains well above pre-COVID levels. Around 780 million people currently face hunger worldwide. Around 2.4 billion remain food insecure, and more than 3 billion people are unable to afford a healthy diet. Affordability of nutritious foods remains a major challenge. We are not on target to meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I think it's fair to say that we've been talking about reducing malnutrition for far too long. But the SOFI numbers remain a stark reminder that we are not making the progress that we should be. In considering this, we need to bear in mind that we are not just talking about the requirements for kilograms of food or the requirements for calories. Diets need to be balanced, they need to be nutritious, contain all of the key nutrients, and be healthy. In particularly, we need to pay attention to protein, the indispensable and dispensable amino acids, minerals, vitamins, and the essential fatty acids. We need to be thinking about plant fibre, bioactives, both plant and animal sourced, and plant secondary compounds. And all of these entities need to be considered in terms of providing a balanced, nutritious diet going forward. Calories on their own simply don't cut the mustard. All of this will be exacerbated in terms of climate change and in terms of population growth. It's going to become ever harder to meet the nutrient requirements for a growing population in an uncertain global environment. Education, scientific research, and extension are going to be crucial if we're going to rise to meet this challenge. And I refer you here to the report, the 2018 report published by the International Academy Partnership on Food and Nutrition Security in Asia, which I think offers a rational approach towards tackling the problems and rising to the challenge. The key findings of the ASA or IAP report were that there are certain, if you like, hotspots, countries in the world where food and nutritional security in the future is a particular, or is likely to be, a particular pressing problem, and those countries are listed here. They're suggested as a rational starting point as to where to work, as to where to do work, extension, scientific investigation, education, that may be most effective in tackling the challenges posed by future food and nutrition security. It was suggested by the report that systems analysis needs to be applied within these domains to identify the key impediments to future nutrient production, and to use that to develop a blueprint for education, science and technology, and extension. And I think the findings of this report remain ever relevant in 2023. And it's high time that we began to muster resources in a rational, planned way to head off the challenges that we see coming down the line in the immediate future. And if we go back to that slide on the SOFI analysis of the 2023 situation, we already suffer unconscionable nutritional insecurity in the world, but it's likely to only get greater with growing populations, particularly in the developing world, and in the face of the exigencies of climate change. Science and technology, education, research and extension has to be part of our solution going forward. And I would urge people to read the IAP report that really gives a detailed analysis of the kind of work we can do now to avoid major humanitarian problems in the future. Also, I'd like to make a few comments on how we measure and describe nutrients in diets and why that matters. And I'm going to give here an example of protein. The recommendation for protein, the RDA, for an adult is given as 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram body weight per day. But that requirement value is given in units of absorbed utilisable protein. Protein that has a protein quality score, a DIAS, equal to 1 or 100%. If the protein quality score of a mixed diet happens to in effect be, say, 50%, then the required amount of dietary protein would be 0.8 divided by 0.5, and not 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight per day, but 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram body weight per day. The requirement value is given in units of utilisable protein, and if the protein fed in the actual dietary pattern is less than 100% protein quality, then the actual requirement for total protein is much higher than the 0.8 grams per kilogram number. That is often misunderstood. Well, does it matter? And the answer to that is yes. Simplistic analyses can lead to very wrong conclusions and wrong predictions in terms of nutrient requirements for future food and nutrition security. And I give here an example, once again, for protein in developing countries, and a scenario that one will often read in the literature, that the average daily per capita protein consumption in most developing countries relative to the average daily protein requirement means that adults in these countries consume excess protein, and that protein simply isn't an issue. And you can see in the graph, the green is the intake of plant-based proteins, and the orange-red is the intake of animal-based proteins. And you can see that for most of those developing countries, the total protein intake exceeds the requirement value of 50 grams per capita per day by quite an amount. And it would seem to back up the statement that protein isn't a concern. However, and bearing in mind my previous comments about using the right metrics and understanding the nutrient supply, if the dietary protein quality value for those countries is applied and used to correct the total protein intakes, one can now see a very, very different outcome. And in fact, for each of those developing countries, the total utilisable protein intake, which is what counts, that's the units in which the requirement is actually given, the total utilisable protein intake falls below the utilisable protein requirement of 50 grams per person per day by quite an amount for most of those countries. And that would coincide with what we see in the field in terms of poor development in children, stunting, and so on. And one arrives at a very, very different conclusion. And that, of course, is going to be very important going forward in terms of predicting future nutrient supplies and future food adequacy. We need to understand the metrics, we need to take into account bioavailability, and we need to be sure that we're looking at nutrient intakes in the population in terms of the right currency in relation to how requirements for nutrients are expressed. We need to be also careful about accepting hackneyed assumptions. And I'm going to use dairy here as an example to look at the assumption often made that animal foods are too expensive and should be de-emphasised in future dietary patterns globally. Well, it's true that dairy foods are a very rich source of nutrients, but it's also true that dairy is not a cheap source of protein. And here's some numbers here from a recent survey published based on prices in New Zealand, where you can see that textured vegetable protein costs around $1.40 New Zealand dollars per 100 grams of digested protein, compared to around 3 New Zealand dollars per 100 grams digested protein for liquid milk and skim milk powder. The textured vegetable protein based on soya is a much cheaper source of protein, at least in that marketplace. However, dairy happens to be a cost-competitive source of amino acids, and people need amino acids, not protein. Once again, we need to be careful about the way in which we describe the nutrients ultimately required in the dietary pattern for humans. And if you look there at methionine, the skim milk powder is almost half the price compared to the soybean TVP. It is a much cheaper, although it's a more expensive source of total protein, it's a considerably cheaper source of methionine. And I know that Dr. Lamb, Sylvia, will come back to this later in the session in her presentation looking at linear programming and least cost diets. Overall, ladies and gentlemen, we need healthy diets, and they are diets that will provide a variety of food types, both plant and animal, and will cover the needs for all of the key nutrients and potentially also important non-nutrient compounds such as antioxidants, microbes such as probiotics, etc., and a whole raft of undoubtedly important food bioactives. Diets must not only provide nutrients and these other cofactors and thus be healthy and balanced, but as I've made the point, they also need to be affordable. And we need to take into account both the domains of nutrition and affordability in addition to the domain of environmental sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Dr. Moen. And we're going to hold questions till the end, as we said. So if you have any, please hold them till the end of the presentations. With that, I'll introduce our second speaker, Dr. Imelda Angeles Zangdepa from the Philippines, who will be speaking to us today about improving nutrition for greater food security in the Philippines. Dr. Agdepa is recognized widely for her important contributions to the field of nutrition. She's currently with the Department of Science and Technology in the Food and Nutrition Research Institute in the Philippines. She's a principal investigator in numerous community research trials. She's published many papers in peer-reviewed journals and has been invited as a paper presenter or to give oral comments at many international and nutritional fora. She's been awarded as one of 10 leaders in nutrition in the Philippines, and was recently, she received a citation award from the Professional Regulations Commission in the Philippines. So she's truly one of the real experts in global nutrition in the Philippines. We're lucky to have her on the docket. She'll be speaking with us virtually today. Dr. Agdepa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cantor. So I will I will share my screen. Can you now see my screen? Hello?
Not yet. They're getting it up right now, Imelda. They'll be ready in a couple of seconds.
Is it okay now?
Yes, it is. You can
Okay.
speak now.
Okay, so the title of my report of my presentation is actually Improving Food Security for Nutrition in the Philippines and the current situation and areas for intervention. So this is the Food and Nutrition Research Institute is the premier research agency of the government in nutrition, food, science, and technology services. And the outline of my presentation would be telling you the food security challenges and the trends in the nutritional status in the Philippines, government efforts that are actually installed to address malnutrition and food security. And then lastly, I will talk about areas to do more and future undertaking to improve the nutrition situation and food security in our country. Now, based on our National Nutrition Survey, the prevalence of moderate and severely food insecure household based on the tool given to us or global tool by FAO, that's the FICE, Food Insecurity Experience Scale. It has revealed that in 2021, 33.4% were moderately food insecure, and about 33.4% of the households are food insecure from moderate to severely, but out from the 33.4, 2% were severely food insecure. And this is revealed because, the contributory factor might be because of the degradation of the Philippine biodiversity, wherein it has an unstable production and consumption, or the impact of which would be on the green economy. You can see here that our forest and agricultural lands, 8 million hectares, were actually converted, and the 98,933 hectares of agricultural lands were approved for land conversion, and the others are actually for degraded soil due to pollution. And apart from that, our blue economy also is actually decreasing. And you can see that the 2021 total fisheries production has exhibited a reduction of about 3.4% loss from the previous year's production of 4,400,000 metric tons. Now, looking at the landscape of that scenario, you can see that our households, about 3 out of 10 households were actually just meeting our energy and nutrient requirement. Our protein requirement, about 5 out of 10. However, I would just like to inform you that the protein intake comes mainly from our rice, because the Philippines has rice as the staple food. And the vitamin A, about 2 out of 10 are actually having only are meeting the requirement. And for iron, it's very terrible, and only 1 out of 10 are actually is actually having or meeting the energy requirement or the nutrient requirement. The same holds true with calcium, and vitamin C, only 2 out of 10. And the mean one-day household per capita food cost by place of residence and wealth status in the urban area, we have calculated that the total household food cost was 280.36, while in urban area, 234.03. This statistics was actually taken from our 2018-2019 merged files from the expanded National Nutrition Survey.
Excuse me, Dr. Agdepa. I'm sorry to stop you, but your slides are not syncing up with the presentation You can move the slides yourself. Can you go to the slide that you want to be at? Because I think we're not in sync. The slide that's up there is not the slide you were talking about.
It's different, you mean?
I think you weren't, what you were speaking about wasn't lined up with the slide that was on the screen. So if you can forward to the slide you are currently at, that would be great. Or if you need us to do it here, we can do it here as well.
She's not showing anything.
Oh, are you sharing your slides with us right now? Or we can move them, and if you just tell us which slide you're at.
You have it already. Can
Now
you see
it's-
this already?
Yes, now we can see it.
Okay. Sorry for that. I thought.
No, no problem. It's just good to have it
Okay.
synced up.
So I stop from here. I stop here. So what I was saying is that our energy and nutrient intake is actually very, very inadequate. And the food cost from our urban area that was actually gathered during the 2018-2019 Expanded National Nutrition Survey revealed that in urban area, about 280.86 food costs per day. In the rural area, about 234.03 food costs per day. However, if we try to disaggregate our data by wealth quintile, you can see here that the poorest only have 181.32 pesos per day, and the richest about 365.75 centavos per day. Yeah, and you can see already that there's actually a discrepancy. And because of that, we experience the triple burden of malnutrition. Undernutrition remains high, especially among our children, like stunting, wasting, and this is coupled with overweight and obesity and micronutrient deficiencies, and also overweight among our adults. And our prevalence for the non-communicable diseases is also increasing. And you can just imagine how our population is actually having these different types of problem. And if we approach the problem, there should be a holistic intervention to actually address the situation. Now, what would be the solution? Of course, we have the 8-point agenda of our president. I think we are very happy because he included food security as one of the agenda. And most of these are actually tackling by the different government agencies. And if we have this, we hope that in the near future by 2030 or 2020, by the end of term, I hope that scenario of malnutrition and food security will be improved. And this is embodied in our Philippine Development Plan for 2023 and 2028. And for the Nutrition Integrated Philippine Plan of Action for Nutrition is also there. For us as serving this as a blueprint for the nutrition implementing agencies to be actually keeping track on the different interventions posted by the different agencies in this plan. So we also like to actually address the whole value chain, meaning to say from demand, supply to food environment, wherein the problem really is more on the production side because of our increasing or ballooning population. The production is actually lesser than the population. Therefore, consumption is actually very low. And there's also a problem on transportation, distribution, and the accessibility. And with this, I'd like to summarize my report or my presentation by saying the takeaway message wherein we have to conduct more researches, giving evidences on the different significant solutions or interventions across identified gaps in the food value chain that I already have told you a while ago to provide basis for loss relative to achieving food security. Now, the stunting prevalence of the Philippines is actually not really a very not improving, no? Meaning to say it's not reducing a significant change. And therefore, there's really a need for us to develop innovative farm and food technologies in order that all of this food produced could be accessible to everybody. With this, I'd like to say thank you to everyone. Over to you, Dr. Meek.
Thank you very much, Dr. Agdepa, for that presentation on the situation, the nutritional situation in the Philippines. Again, we'll have time for a couple of questions at the end of the session, so please hold them till then. Our third speaker and the final of our speakers who will be speaking to us virtually is Dr. Sylvia Chungchenlam. Dr. Chungchenlam is also with Massey University in New Zealand, where she serves as a research officer at the Riddit Institute. Her research focuses on the nutritional value of foods and the bioavailability of nutrients, with a particular interest in the digestion, absorption, and utilization of proteins, vitamins, and minerals. Her current research uses linear programming as an approach to investigate the composition of least cost, nutritionally adequate dietary patterns. And with that, Dr. Chungchenlam will be speaking us today about the development of this model to generate affordable, nutritious diets in developing countries. Sylvia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mitch. So today I'm talking about the development of a model to generate affordable, nutritious diets in developing countries. So we know that the report Reducing Inequalities for Food Security and Nutrition have reported that while inequalities in food security are particularly seen to affect populations in Africa, South Asia, and the Caribbean, inequality in nutritional status exists globally. And the SOFI report has also reported that globally in 2021, 42% of the population were unable to afford a healthy diet. And and Africa reported the highest proportion of the population unable to afford a healthy diet, with 78% of the population in Africa, and Western Africa 34%, and Eastern Africa 35%. Compared to Asia, where Southern Asia showed the highest proportion in the Asian region to be of a population to be unable to afford a healthy diet. While the cost of a healthy diet, while a healthy diet is determined by food-based dietary guidelines, this diet is not based on nutrient content, but it is considered to be nutrient adequate. However, we wanted to look at the cost of a nutrient adequate dietary pattern. And for this, we use a model, the linear programming, which is a mathematical optimization modeling technique in which the daily diet cost is minimized when subjected to various linear constraints. To develop our model, we have our food database, each with its own energy and nutrient composition, the recommended serving size, and food price. When we're trying to meet the requirements for the adult population for energy, macronutrients, the essential fatty acids, protein, carbohydrate, dietary fiber, minerals, and vitamins. And that will give us a least cost nutrient adequate diet with a daily diet cost, the diet composition of a nutrient adequate diet, and to identify cost effective nutritious foods that are included in this nutrient adequate diet and the nutrient profile. So our main goal is to identify what are those least cost nutritious foods and food groups that are included in those least cost nutrient adequate diets. And this study has been conducted in the US and in New Zealand, and it has just started in Southeast Asia and in Africa. So in the US, this study has been conducted in 2019 and has been funded by Global Dairy Platform and Dairy Management Incorporation. And we found that the cost of the nutrient adequate diet in the US was $1.98 per day and included animal source foods. We had our milk, eggs, and fish. Then we wanted to look at what price does the animal source foods will drop out to give a plant-only model diet. And we found that the original market prices of animal source foods needed to be increased by 2 to 11.5 times the original price. Particularly, milk had to be increased by 8 times, eggs by 11.5 times, and fish by 6.5 times the original price. And this gave rise to a plant-only model diet that cost nearly twice the amount of the nutrient-adequate diet that actually had plant-based, that had animal source foods. And both model diets had our energy-rich foods, our vegetables, our legumes, and most importantly, dairy milk was replaced by fortified soy milk. These were the first limiting nutrients, the nutrients that are met at 100% of the recommended dietary allowance or adequate intake. And those are the nutrients that are of concern, particularly vitamin C and vitamin K when the diet included animal source foods, and pantothenic acid, which is a B5 vitamin in a diet that contained only plant-based foods. The US government gives food subsidies to the animal sector, and we thought that there may be some potential food price distortions. So the study was repeated in New Zealand. And we found that in New Zealand, the cost of a nutrient adequate diet was 1.84 international US dollars per day and included animal source foods, our milk and eggs and mussels. The linear programming model in New Zealand was dynamic so that we could actually alter the daily energy and nutrient requirements for the adult male and the adult female. And also the price of different food groups could also be changed. Using this dynamic food group pricing changes, we could see at what price animal source foods would actually be excluded to give a plant-only model diet. And in the case of New Zealand, we find that the price needed to be increased by 1.05 to 11.25 times the original market price. Particularly, our milk needed to be increased by 2.2 times the original price, our eggs by 1.8 to 1.85 times, and seafood 10.3 to 11.25 times the original price. And these were the first limiting nutrients for the New Zealand adult population, and particularly for the adult male, when the diet included animal source foods, molybdenum and potassium were first limiting. And when the diet only included plant-based foods, vitamin B12 and zinc were first limiting. In the case of the New Zealand female adult, vitamin D and iron were first limiting in both model diets. And in the diet that included animal source foods, molybdenum and potassium. But in the diet that contained only plant-based foods, biotin, vitamin B12, and vitamin K were first limiting. And the cost of those plant-only model diets were about 30 to 45% more expensive than if the diet actually included animal source foods. Then we wanted to ask the questions if the relative costs of animal source foods versus plant-based foods higher in developing countries. And this is very important because of the higher food insecurity and nutrient insecurity that is found in developing countries. And this study has just started, and we are looking in Southeast Asia, particularly Indonesia and the Philippines. And Dr. Imelda talked a bit about the Philippines and the cost. And we're also looking in Africa, particularly in Tanzania and Kenya. This has just started in Indonesia, and we've got some very preliminary results. And we found that in Indonesia, the cost of a nutrient adequate diet was 1.57 international US dollars per day, and included our milk, mostly for the provision of calcium, chicken liver for the provision of vitamin A, and clams to supply niacin, sodium, and potassium. For the Indonesian adult population, the first limiting nutrients were found to be dietary fiber, potassium, and sodium, and potentially zinc. So using the linear programming diet optimization approach, the cost of nutrient adequate dietary patterns for adults were modeled for the US, New Zealand, and Indonesia. And we also wanted to identify the cost-effective nutritious food groups. And this study is still ongoing, and we will still be looking at Southeast Asia and more countries in Africa. But looking at the US and New Zealand and Indonesia, we found that the cost of milk is 4.6 to 5.7 times more cheaper than the cost of legumes. And for eggs in the US and New Zealand, the cost of eggs were 1.4 to 2.6 times cheaper than the cost of legumes. However, in Indonesia, the cost of eggs is actually more expensive. So it's higher, it's 2.1 times higher than the cost of legumes. And hopefully Mr. Roger Pelicero can talk a bit more about eggs. So our study is trying to meet the SDG 2 with zero hunger and has some implications also in SDG 1 for no poverty and SDG 3 to ensure healthy lives and promote the well-being for all at all ages. The linear programming studies has an implication for food security, for the access to balanced, nutritionally adequate diets at least cost. It has implications for nutrient security to identify the cost-effective foods that provide essential nutrients to all. I would like to thank the Reader Institute and Massey University and our funding bodies, the Global Dairy Platform, the US Dairy Export Council, and Dairy Management Incorporation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Changchen Lam. Again, for those who've just come in, we'll have questions at the end if you have any questions for any of the speakers who've spoken thus far. With that, I'll introduce our next speaker who is with us live today, and that's Mr. Roger Pelisaro. Roger is the current chair of Egg Farmers of Canada, and he will be speaking to us today on the impact of egg nutrition in developing countries on regional health and economic opportunities. Mr. Pelisaro is a third-generation egg farmer and the chair of Egg Farmers of Canada. He's an office holder with the International Egg Commission, the global voice and network of egg producers and processors across the world. Roger's passionate about sustainability, and he's an advocate for evidence-based research that supports progress and innovation. He's a founding member of the Global Initiative for Sustainable Eggs and recently co-chaired the Canadian Poultry Sustainability Value Chain Roundtable. He's a member of the Egg Industry Center Board of Advisors at Iowa State University in the United States as well. With that, Roger, floor is yours.
Thank you for that kind introduction, and it's really good to be here today for this discussion and important conversation. In my remarks today, I'll be speaking about the impacts of eggs and egg nutrition in developing countries. I also offer a case study of the agricultural development project that we are engaged in that has an impact in Eswatini, Africa. Our eggs uniquely positioned to help feed a hungry world. There is no doubt we have a lot to work to do when it comes to the challenges that face the global community and the need to feed more people using fewer resources. This is something we've been thinking about for more than a decade at Egg Farmers of Canada and with our global colleagues at the International Egg Commission. The stats and numbers of malnutrition and undernutrition are clear, and the challenge is growing. Too many people around the world are malnutritioned. Upwards of 1 billion people do not consume enough animal protein, and malnutrition and undernutrition is a significant contributor to stunting, wasting, and death. As a farmer, I see this as a moral challenge and one we all must play a role to find a solution in by making nutritious foods both accessible and affordable. We believe the humble egg can help right this wrong in the world. We know that low consumption of animal source foods increase the risk of malnutrition, particularly in early childhood development. Research studies conducted in Uganda, Rwanda, and Thailand found that eating eggs could dramatically improve the growth and development in school-aged children and contribute positively to their physical development. Adding just 1 egg a day to the child's diet significantly increases growth in weight and height. Other evidence-based research is pointed to the role that eggs rich in essential nutrients can improve the immune response system in vaccination programs and play a big role and take in the health of expectant mothers. Just 1 egg a day can make a big difference. We also want to take a look at solutions to improve the diets of populations around the world, but we also must focus on the sustainability aspect and the resources that we embrace for practices that care for our planet. Eggs have a strong track record in that regard. The World Resource Institute has ranked them as amongst the most sustainable form of animal protein, and egg farmers are actively developing more sustainable production practices. This knowledge and expertise can be shared with farmers around the world, allowing the production of more eggs using fewer resources. There is also the matter of ease of production. Egg production is scalable from a few hens to support a local family to a larger scale operation that feed multiple people inside the community. The possibilities are endless. With training and technical support, we can equip small farmers and families with the ability to supplement their diet with nutritious eggs. We can offer a pathway towards a model that allows them to turn their farming practices to generate income and support the economic activity in their community. This is not about wealthy countries shipping eggs to other parts of the world. It's about a successful model that improves and expands the domestic farming capability to produce eggs locally. One example I want to share is our work that we do in Heart for Africa. It's a small landlocked country in Eswatini. This country is faced with many challenges ranging from high rates of HIV to orphan children and widespread malnutrition. Our work in Eswatini began in 2014 as we embarked on our partnership with the local community to construct an egg farm there, now filled with 5,000 laying hens. We trained local staff and helped develop specialized techniques to run this farm. For example, we have an egg preserving boiling machine that allows hard-cooked eggs to be stored for 30 days at 30 degrees Celsius without refrigeration. As we grow the operation, so did the role for Heart for Africa in the community. Their baby home took in more babies. Currently, they have 380 children under the age of 8, and that's expanding. They've added more employment to the community, and the reach of the egg distribution program has extended. The outcome has been incredible. With just one egg farm, we've made eggs a regular staple diet for the community and the children on the orphanage. Children are benefiting from the increased nutrition. Farmers are learning new skills, and the community benefits from employment. It makes me proud to say that every meal delivered through Heart for Africa's feeding program includes an egg, which provides the essential nutrients and protein. I've visited Project Canaan many times over the last 10 years. In fact, I'll be going there again next month. The children are thriving, and the diets and the people in the community have tremendously improved. It's a successful model that can be replicated well across the world. My first visit there in 2014, when we looked out over the countryside before we built the barn, it was dark at night. You've seen some fires in huts. When I was there last fall, you see many huts with electricity now because of the employment of the farm and the opportunity for people to have income now and support their families. When organizations like Heart for Africa and the farming community work together, anything can be accomplished. The diets and well-being of the local population greatly improve. Establishing a local sustainable source of eggs is a perfect way to ensure protein and vitamins are incorporated into the diet of vulnerable children and the adults. The contributions of egg farmers in Canada go far beyond bricks and mortar and construction. Volunteers such as myself, family members, have gone countless times to help the local Swazis and share our knowledge and expertise to manage the farm. We have developed and strengthened their biosecurity practices and supported them through challenges. And one of the major challenges they're facing right now and throughout the world is high path AI, bird flu. Our vision is that animal proteins, especially eggs, play a critical role in addressing malnutrition and protein deficiencies. They are nutrient dense, sustainable, and the production is scalable. A successful model focuses on building capacity and capabilities within communities, equipping local farmers with the skills they need to survive. This approach is already helping families generate income. This is one way we can help populations around the world get the nutrition they need to survive, all while supporting the adoption of more efficient farming practices. By working together with local farmers, we make eggs even more accessible and strengthen food systems around the world. To close off my presentation, I want to return to my original question. Are eggs uniquely positioned to help feed a hungry world? I believe they are. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that excellent presentation, Roger. Now we'll move to our final speaker of the session. And I wanted to introduce Ms. Marie Chantal Messier. Marie Chantal is Head of Food and Industry Affairs for the Nestle Company in Switzerland. She will be speaking to us today on how the private sector can be part of the solution to accessible and affordable nutritious diets for all. First, a brief introduction to Marie. She's an Assistant Vice President and Global Head of Food and Industry Affairs at Nestle. She provides leadership on corporate food and nutrition agenda and policy work relating to regenerative food systems. She's also responsible for marketing, industry benchmarking, and ESG engagement. Marie is passionate about driving positive change towards sustainable diets by leveraging the strengths of both the private and public sectors. She's worked extensively internationally, primarily in the nutrition arena in several regions of the world for the World Bank, for the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, or GAIN, as many of you know them as, the UN World Food Program in Haiti. She's country director for Helen Keller International in Guinea and Sierra Leone, and also worked at the Canadian Centre for the Study of International Cooperation in Mali and in Eastern Ontario. So with that, I'll turn the mic over to Marie Chantal Messier.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Really pleased to see a big room. We didn't quite expect it because I know many people have actually flown back home and many people are sick. So really, really pleased. And so really thank you for being here. I'm also very honored, and thank you, Mitch, for putting this panel together. I'm very honored when you hear about all the experiences and the wealth of knowledge and expertise on this panel. I have to say I'm quite humbled to be here today. So we've heard about a lot of the challenges about affordable diets. What are the challenges that people are facing and countries are facing? We've heard about some affordable solutions, eggs, milk, to solve these challenges. And then what I thought I would do today is to give you one example from the Nestle company as to what is possible in terms of contributing to addressing affordable and nutritious diets around the world. So let me move to the next slide. So, and how do we do that? So what I would suggest is, so I'm a public health dietitian by training, and one of the things that I've learned moving into the private sector 10 years ago is to take a consumer lens approach. And what we realize is that in consumer diet, there's a gap. There's the aspiration. So what we found out through a research in 15 markets around the world is that the wide majority of people aspire to eat a healthy and balanced diet. And then there's the reality. And what are the challenges that they face basically are cost, we saw that, affordability, treats, people, they want taste, They want to treat themselves. Food is not just to nourish the body, but it's also part of our culture. It's also part of our celebration. So this is, they acknowledge that. I think we've seen that also during COVID. People were living in a stressful environment and they use food to basically treat themselves and also manage some of their stress. Time constraint, time to cook. Many people, whether you are in a low and middle income country or in a higher income country, you spend a lot of time getting to and back to work, much time in traffic. So people have less time. And then absolutely social. So the need for social gathering. So those are some of the challenges. And then of course, habit access. But what I would like to say is that often the drivers of food purchase is cost, taste, and accessibility. And then nutrition comes often more on after those considerations. So what does that translate into? Well, as we saw, there's more than 3 billion people that cannot afford a healthy diet. And then what's quite dire and sobering is by 2030, more than half of the planet will be either overweight or obese. We still have undernutrition, particularly micronutrient deficiencies. 2 billion people suffer from vitamin and minerals deficiency. And then unfortunately, the poor, the women and children are the most at risk and the more targeted at this. So that's the sobering consumer lens to this, but there is a silver lining. So what's driving a company such as Nestlé, but many other companies are doing that, and I'll talk more about that. What's driving companies' action and what role can we play? So we looked at this. So purpose. For us, our purpose is to bring, we have an ambition to bring tasty and balanced diet to people around the world for today, but also for generations to come, and to unlock the power of food. Science and technology. What does science say? So a lot of our approaches are rooted in science. What is the epidemiological data saying in the country, and how can we adapt our portfolio and our products to address the nutrition challenge? What are the current technology available? So recently, we have developed a technology to reduce sugar while increasing fiber in products that are from dairy. And so as science evolves, we can further increase the nutritional value of products. Trends, consumer trends. I had a discussion earlier today on how consumer trends impact the food that we produce, but I think that's a very important one, because answering what consumers want is often a big driver of our actions. And then I would say, if I look back at earlier in my career, something that didn't exist but is absolutely front and center is sustainability and planetary health. So this is something that we are increasingly looking at when we are designing our recipes and designing our products. And then last but not least, how can we contribute to the achievement of the SDGs? And particularly SDG 1, 2, 3, and 17 through collaboration. So how can we do that? What's our role? Definitely evolving our portfolio so that we can bring affordable and sustainable diets to people, improving our products, and of course, transparently communicating to our consumers about the nutritional value of our products so that they can make informed decision, whether it's on nutritional value or on sustainability. So speaking of bringing good for you, so nutritional value, and good for the planet, I'm really, really pleased because at the beginning of the year, we published our regeneration wheel, that we call it our regeneration wheel, and we made nutrition as an integral part of our sustainability promise to advance regenerative food system at scale. And how we do that, so it's very interesting because a few years ago, we started with the climate. So we put a climate pledge out there Then we strengthen our, how do we improve the lives of people in our supply chain, basically in our communities where we work. And then we completed the wheel with the impact of our products on the consumer, on people, families. And what you will see is that we have focus areas under each of these three parts. And let me focus in on the nutrition part. Basically, we have 4 key focus areas. And what we do, why are they important, is because going back to adopting a consumer lens, we are bringing this to life through our brands. So what we do is we ask our brands to pick at least one of these focus areas and bring it through life in their, not only in their product, but also in their communication to consumers. So for example, on nutrition, we have, they can choose to improve the nutritional value of the food or their products. They can also address a specific nutritional need through the products by having a tailored nutrition. So for example, we have medical nutrition products. So we, how can we help? We have people with Alzheimer's, so we've developed product for people with Alzheimer's so that it can slow down the progression of the disease. We also have products for people who have cancer. So how can we safeguard and protect the nutritional status of people? But we also have products for young children and increasingly for pregnant mothers and adolescent girls. We have how can we improve access to affordable nutrition? And last year we delivered 129 billion servings of fortified affordable products in low and middle income countries. So one way is basically to fortify, enrich with vitamins and minerals, and then encouraging and supporting balanced diets through lifestyle promotion. So let me move on to what has kept me awake for the last 2 years of my life, awake at night and weekends and during the day. I'm presenting an example for Nestlé, but what I'm really pleased is that many other companies such as Unilever, Danone, Tesco, and retailers such as Tesco and Sainsbury have also published similar strategies, commitments, and key actions. So really, I'm just showing you because that's the company I know best, but rest assured that many other companies are getting on board. And so what we did is we translated our sustainability promise into our updated nutrition approach. And so it fits on one page. If you're interested, I've got extra copies. It's also on our website. But what we decided to do is to set a target to grow the sales of more nutritious food. And we put an ambitious target out there to basically add $20 to $25 billion by 2030 of food that we call nutritious because they're benchmarked through an external benchmarking, an external nutrient profiling system. And we use the HSR because it's also used by the Access to Nutrition Index, which benchmarks the 25 largest food and beverage company in the world. So we really wanted radical transparency on this. And then what we did is recognizing that, yes, people aspire to eat more nutritious food, but also want to treat themselves with some more indulgent food. We decided to basically have a new set of commitments to guide people in eating those in moderation. Where do they fit in a balanced diet so that we, so what we have done is, for example, we report transparently on the entire portfolio, on our entire portfolio. So if you go on the website, and maybe we can, I'm not sure how big it is on the screen, but you can see what part of our portfolio that is indulgent, what part is for mindful enjoyment, and you can also see what part of our portfolio. So basically we have more, about 60% of our portfolio that can be considered bringing good nutritional value. The other thing that we have done is provide more information. When I say transparent about our portfolio, but I think we also need to talk to consumers and guide them by providing information about the nutritional value so that they can make an informed choices. So when they look at a chocolate bar, or they look at a glass of milk, or they look at breakfast cereals, they know which one makes more sense for what they aspire to eat. And then applying responsible marketing practices. This is something that I'm very passionate about. So through, for example, what we have done, we've started with our more indulgent products, ice cream and chocolate, and we've put a calorie cap on servings of ice cream and chocolate that are for children. We've also put portion guidance on what is a reasonable portion to have on chocolate. So for example, if you have a multi-serve, you don't eat the whole package. If you have a Kit Kat, you don't eat the whole Kit Kat. I was like, no, I'm gonna have the whole Kit Kat. But we increasingly help people by smaller serving size, as well as guiding them on what makes sense. So I wanted to share with you some of the learnings that we've had on delivering affordable and sustainable diet. And I think for me, it's very important. So how can we make nutritious and sustainable food the easiest option at all points where people consume food? And I think that's the question we should all ask ourselves, because we all have a role to play. Of course, food and beverage companies have to, but I think retailers, out of home, but the government can also help in bringing that at the table, and definitely civil society, by engaging with us and continuing to put the pressure on us, can also help very much in making healthy options the easiest option. So how should we do that? I think for nutritious option to work, what we learn is you need to build them with local insight. What do people like? What do people consume frequently? And how can you bring positive nutrition through that? Also, what are their nutritional problems? We saw in the Philippines, but they're not the same as in the US. So you really need to adapt your products and your portfolio based on the local situation. We strongly believe in unlocking the potential of local ingredients to improve the impact on diet diversity, of course, but also on the planet. And what you have, the image that you have here, is a product that has been launched last week, so brand new, where actually we have brought the goodness of milk and the goodness of the milk protein, and we've combined it with the goodness of soya in Nigeria, using 100% locally sourced soya grains from Nigerian farmers. And so that allows us to bring the goodness of milk at an affordable price for people of Nigeria. And then last but not least, I think what we can all do together is empower people to make smart nutritional choices. So through education, through guiding, through legislation, through basically an empowering food environment. So on that, thank you very much. And I guess we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation, Marie. We do have a couple of minutes remaining. If anybody has any questions, please feel free. I see one hand up. I think somebody will come around. A couple of hands up. If anybody online has any questions, you can type them into the chat function as well. But we'll get to the questions quickly here because of time constraints, so please.
Thank you very much for organizing this very interesting panel. I had a question for Sylvia. I don't know if she's still with us online.
Yeah, Sylvia, you're on the line, I believe. This question is for you. Okay.
I'm Yvonne van Lauwen. I'm the agricultural attaché for the Netherlands here in Rome. And based on your presentation, I was wondering to what extent you are looking to maybe include the true cost of food into your research, because what we struggle with right now in the Netherlands is the environmental cost that we have with our dairy production. And I think the fact that it's not included in the consumer price might shift the results a little bit, even though these are very real costs that society is burdened with. Thank you.
My modeling actually only took into account consumer prices, and I do realize that there are additional factors that may affect the modeling itself. And this hasn't really been incorporated yet, but that is a good point to make, that actually there are environmental factors, there is the true cost of food production and food systems. So we can definitely improve on our modeling.
Okay, thank you for that response, Dr. Changchenlam. We have a question here, Donald
Hi,
Moore.
I'm Donald Moore. I'm actually with the global dairy industry, but I'm also a member of the private sector mechanism. And firstly, thank you to all of the presenters. This has been a really interesting session, and maybe it builds a little on the question from our colleague from the Netherlands as well. I mean, finding that sweet spot, that nexus between livelihoods, economic growth, nutritional outcomes, environmental outcomes is quite a challenge. And as a leading food company, maybe Marie-Chantal, I'm going to direct this question to you primarily, but as a leading food company, how do you and Nestle, how do you manage that nexus where all these different elements have to come together? And how do you manage those trade-offs in your business?
It's an excellent question. And so the number of parameters to develop a product recipe have really increased. So how do we bring in nutrition, as you say, the environmental impact, and also the cost is quite important. So right now, actually, it's so complex to make and to achieve that sweet spot, the same way that you just said it, is that we're actually using artificial intelligence to speed up the response, to speed up product development, but to make sure that we do achieve that sweet spot between nutrition value, cost, taste, environment, as well as making sure that our communities also have a good livelihood and continue to actually produce in a sustainable manner. Yes.
Thanks for that. We have time for one or two more. Janet, I see your hand up.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Janice Giddens. I'm also with the Private Sector Mechanism and the U.S. Dairy Export Council. So my question is for Dr. Changchenlam and Dr. Morgan, who I know are on the phone. You know, we're sitting here at FAO surrounded by policymakers who are creating global policy for food systems. And so I'm curious, based on your research and your extensive portfolio, what message do you have for the policymakers who are here in the audience today? Thank you.
And so, Janet, you directed that to Dr. Moen, and who was the second person? Yeah. Unfortunately, Dr. Moen had to get off of the line, so he's not there. So, Dr. Changchenlam, did you hear the question directed at you on advice for policymakers regarding your research?
Can you repeat the question, sorry?
Do you want to repeat it, Janet, please?
Hello. Dr. Changchenlam, we're sitting here surrounded by policymakers at FAO. What message do you have for them based on your research? Thank you.
My message is to look at food as an integral part of our health, is to actually find out what is the true cost of when you're consuming foods and which food choice you need to make when you're actually going to the supermarket, is to actually identify which foods are affordable and which foods are nutritious and at least cost. So that would be my message.
Anybody else on the panel? Dr. Depa, have any real brief response to that question? Your message to policy folks who might be available? No? Okay. All right. We have time for one more question here from the audience.
Thank you very much. Carol Cassan with the Irish Farmers Association, also the PSM. Very interesting panel, and it's maybe building on the questions that have come here, but again, it's around the true cost that we're speaking about. So we're kind of talking at the moment about, say, what's above the line when you're adding in your environmental and everything else like that. But what is the view of what should be the kind of common denominator to actually be able to rate, say, food across different types, whether it's plant, whether it's animal, whether it's whatever? Are you looking at something like protein? Are you trying to build something on an energy? Is it micronutrients? Is it amino acids? Or is there any common denominator that we will be able to identify so that, say, somebody in the general population will just pick something up and be able to rate what they're looking at simply?
Is anyone here or on the line, Dr. Depa, Dr. Chungchenlam, want to take?
I can probably answer that, but we actually eat food. We don't actually eat nutrients. So when we eat a food, we eat a food in its whole entirety. We don't actually eat to meet certain particular nutrients, but we're trying to meet everything all together that's recommended. So when we go into a supermarket and we pick up a food, say we pick up milk, we know that it provides calcium, but we also need to be aware that it also provides protein. So we just have to be mindful of which foods are most nutritious and most affordable.
Okay, sure.
I couldn't agree more with what has just been said. And true, what you've seen is now we're moving an approach on a diet-based approach rather than a nutrient-based approach. And I think I was referring to the Health Star rating, but we could also refer to other nutrient profiling model, which are basically looking at all the positive and the health sensitive nutrients that a food can bring. And what we have seen, so I can use, for example, Nutri-Score in Europe, what we have seen is that using more of a global approach to what that food produce has helped do two things. First, it has helped manufacturers to improve the nutritional value of their products by adding more of the positive nutrients as well as reducing. So renovation, it has really pushed food manufacturers toward more innovation and renovation. But it also nudged consumers to basically choose in a category. Now that they have this information transparently to them, then they can compare two products, and depending on their aspiration, can transparently choose between, I can use, for example, I think breakfast cereal is probably the easiest one. So between a more, a breakfast cereal that could have a Nutri-Score D, which might have more sugar, a bit less fiber, or a breakfast cereal that would have a Nutri-Score of B and A, that would have more of the, less of the sugar, more of the whole grain, etc. And we've seen that these are really powerful in nudging consumer in adopting a healthier basket and buying a healthier basket.
Okay, one more brief question. We're about out of time.
I apologize, but I do want to ask a follow-up to that. This is all fantastic when nutrition is a complete science, but as we know, nutrition is an evolving science. And Roger, I know in the egg industry, you suffered for many years with the fact that there was a misheld belief that consuming, eggs were going to lead to, a problem in cholesterol and so on. In the dairy industry, we suffered similarly from saturated fat being seen as a cause of heart disease when the science was finally complete. That wasn't the case. So we've got to be really careful with these guidelines that are starting to get promulgated out there, that we don't perpetuate some of those challenges through incomplete science. I don't know whether, Roger, you've got a comment based on the egg industry. Thank you.
Yeah, no, good question. I mean, back in the 80s and 90s, cholesterol and eggs were evil. Time magazine had, bacon and eggs on the cover with a frown. We did a lot of work with Egg Farms of Canada, International Egg Commission, through dietitians to talk about and educate consumers on cholesterol. Your body needs cholesterol, right? And cholesterol in food affects different people different ways. But through all of that, we were able to turn the table around, and we now have doctors and dietitians recommending at least an egg a day. I say 2 is even better, because we've seen the results and what it does for especially children. Breakfast programs in North America and around the world, that child is far more attentive in class. It helps with their brain development, helps with their eye development. So there's so many benefits to start feeding nutrient-rich, protein-rich foods to babies as young as 6 months. And that's even where we've gotten to with dietitians' recommendations and doctors' recommendations. So yeah, it's about a balance. Everything is about a balance. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you. I wish we had more time for questions. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I just wanted to sum up the session with a couple of quick notes from what we heard from our speakers. I think important to say that as we endeavor to solve issues of global malnutrition, it's important to remember, among other things, that all foods are important. Animal source foods, plant source foods, excluding one type of food from the diet probably isn't a good thing from a nutritional perspective, getting all the micronutrients, macronutrients that we need. We heard Dr. Mon talk about this. Among other things, he also talked about the importance of protein quality and some of the work that he's done in that arena with the DIAS methodology and the importance of animal source foods in that regard. Dr. Chung Chun Lam spoke about the model that she's been working on and looking at least cost diets and how including foods that give us the most nutrition for the least cost is important to make foods accessible and affordable both in developed and developing countries. We heard about malnutrition and NCDs and some of the nutrition-related issues that afflict developing countries like the Philippines. And we also heard from a representative of the egg industry, how industries like egg are trying to do something about it by setting up farms and within developing countries to help people learn to be more self-sufficient in growing their own food, as well as minimizing or eradicating malnutrition issues that afflict particularly children in those countries. And finally, we heard from Marie Chantal Messier about how the private sector could potentially play a role, not only in supplying funding for projects, but also know-how and passion that's necessary in order to enact some of the changes that need to be enacted globally to minimize or eradicate malnutrition. So we will leave it at that. Thanks so very much for joining us today. And thanks for your questions. I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions today. Thank you.